Hi, Julie.
Hi, Lewis. How are you? Nice to
I'm
see you.
great. You look wonderful. How are you
Uh,
doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy
Good.
to talking to you.
It's so great. And as we were saying in our correspondence, we haven't spoken in a while, so this is a really great connection to kind of have a live catch up
Yeah,
in front of this audience, of which will be many of our friends and also new people who don't know about what we've been working on and what you do. And so thank you for joining us today to have a curious conversation.
yeah, for sure. I'm excited. It's always good to talk to you. I always learn something when I talk to you.
Well, I absolutely feel the same way. And just to kind of share with the listeners, many know Julie through her work for many years in the fashion industry. You led fashion and the direction of fashion for Barney's New York for many years, and really played such a pivotal role in identifying young designers, emerging designers that would be really showcased and their careers could be launched through Barney's New York. And then your consulting over the last decade that has been working pivotally again with corporations and fashion industry and folks like us. You were an advisor to our Fashion Positive initiative and really helping us think through how to bring sustainability work into the heartbeat of this industry. So, and now you've merged your consultancy with Tomorrow, and so I want to learn all about it. So did I characterize you correctly? That's how I think of you.
It's perfect as
Great,
usual.
great. So, Julie, I think I first came to know about you about 20 years ago when I was, and I've told you this before, but when I was working with some designers from Argentina and really trying to bring them into the United States, and learned about you. And then fast forward to, the late 2010s. I went to a sustainable brands conference, and you were on that wonderful panel with Scott McKinley Hahn, Zim Joachim, and Linda Loudermilk. And that's when I sort of got brought back into the world, and you were really talking about sustainability. You had done the Green Christmas at Barney's, you had been working with Stella McCartney, and now it's a decade later plus. I mean, it might be like 12, 13 years ago. Like, what's changed since what was going on and what you were really driving and bringing into the industry as sustainable fashion then, and what you're seeing now?
Well, it's actually been a huge change. I mean, that was 2010 was, post recession, and so there was a lot of conversation before the post recession on sustainability and Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, and a lot of the iconic Vanity Fair cover with Leo DiCaprio, and
Mhm.
just all of that. There was a lot of a conversation, and then the recession hit, and the conversation went dead. And then after that, it sort of kind of came back up again and has got gained traction, but was gaining traction, but it was still considered an outlier sensibility in fashion. There was no real drive or consumer awareness of it. And I think just fast forward with, all the climate impact we've seen and the growing awareness and the voice of the, new generation, and just so many things, and the emphasis on trying to, turn the planet into, a climate positive planet. I think that it's just now it's a part of the way you have to do business. And I think
Mhm.
actually one of the biggest changes, I think, is when the investment community saw that companies that were showing accountability for that were actually better investment than those that weren't. And so then you
Absolutely.
got the guys that were making, I have to say guys, it was because it mostly is
Mhm.
men that were, driving profits, saw that as part of that. So there's just many things, but generally I think we've seen over particularly the last 5 years, visually,
Mhm.
results of lack of being planet attentive.
Yeah.
So, and everybody's responsible. There's not one person on this planet that's not responsible. for their part, for their partaking in the solutions.
Absolutely. I work, and you do too, but I work a lot on the sort of corporate sustainability side of these brand retailers. But what you've done a lot of is those personal relationships to the designer and really thinking through the lens of the design community, your relationship to Parsons, and serving as a mentor and leadership there, I think is a big key to this. Do you feel that this next generation of designers, or even the designers you're talking to now, are different because of the education they're receiving or because of the influence?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a really good example. I've been working on the LVMH prize for the past 7 years. And when we first started the prize, it's a very simple application, but there was really, there was only, and we get thousands of applicants, and we go through all of them, and there was only just a handful of people that were talking about upcycling or recycling or any sort of sustainability. And that has changed almost. I mean, I think there was really a change 3 seasons ago, definitely 2 seasons, where it was a part of the conversation of what I do. In terms of just I'm a designer and I make fabulous things. It's also, this is how I make them and this is what I use. And this is how I'm responsible. I mean, it was part of their storytelling, and that has changed. And so, it's the low talks to the high, and the high talks to the low. And so, the larger brands today, there's not one that doesn't have a corporate social responsibility plan, or has a whole list of things that they're doing, who doesn't have climate goals. So it is really, really changed, and it's just a part of the fashion conversation.
I love that. We used to talk about how a lot of the students, and I would go and present or teach classes with the teams at these various design schools too, as a special guest speaker and all, and we would kind of talk about how that activism when you're in college or high school or in graduate school, all of us kind of experience. That's sort of a typical thing that youth experience, that awakening. They're away from their families and parents, and they're seeing the world in a new way. But then they would have to leave and go work for these big companies, and all that would get put in a box, and they wouldn't be able to ever bring that level of activism, inclusivity of fashion, designing for all types of humans and people, and sustainability. But it feels like that's not the case now, that there are homes inside these brands for that passion and those values driven design approaches. Is that correct?
Yeah, completely correct. I mean, I think it's also, I mean, I think in some cases, it actually, it comes from the desire to develop the next new generation of customers. And that's where, there's all kinds of statistics to say that they're going to have a lot of buying power. And so how does the company start to develop a strategy for that? And this is part of it, is accountability, purposefulness. These are all things that they're talking about. And a generation of people that would get just as much fun as buying something that's been used than something that is new. There's issues there because the fashion business is driven by consumption. And so I think that's besides being responsible to the planet, it's also, I think, companies are driven by that business part of it too. And so how can they appeal to this next new generation?
Yeah. So that makes me think a lot about the last 12 months of our lives and how this pandemic has illuminated an already fragile supply chain and industry, but retail is shuttering and was before the pandemic. I mean, already retail was at risk. Production cycles and the way that they're financed, and supply chain, so that we had canceled orders. And then also value shift. Consumers are sitting at home going, do I need all this stuff? What do I want? I'm worried about whether I'll have my job in 6 months. So there's this pause, and then there may be this resurgence of spending, like we don't necessarily know. I'm sure the analysts are taking a look, and the futurists. What do you think in terms of where this industry is going to be headed as a result of this magnifying glass that just got presented to us because of the pandemic?
Well, I think pre-pandemic, I think all of us were thinking that the system is not sustainable. Designers were burnt out. Buyers were traveling. I talked to one buyer that was traveling 11 times a year to Europe. Um, it just was not sustainable, and we were all feeling it. And the system was just growing more and more, and we were having to accommodate it. And the pandemic just shut all that down. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think we rebuild a new sort of system, it will be more sustainable, it'll be more efficient, and it'll also be more balanced, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to new designers today, they're less about the system than they are about creating something that works for them and their point of view. And I talked to one designer yesterday, and they the seasons were like fall, winter, spring, summer, and they're like, no, it's season one, it's season two, it's season three, it's season four. It's not even labeled, because they don't want to have to be, you know, put in a position where they have to follow a timeline that doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And so I think this whole thing of being shut down and having to do everything digitally and having to communicate on Zoom, it's kind of cleaned out a lot of the peripheral things. And I
Yeah.
think that's good. And I don't think anyone at this point really wants to build back where we were. I think the big question is, what do we build, and how do we build something new? And that's hard to do, but I think it is possible. And also, the other thing that I think is so interesting is that the younger designers coming out, they really understand how to reuse things. They upcycle, they repurpose, they regenerate.
Mm-hmm.
All of this. They use dead stock materials. That's a very cool part of their storytelling, and that really wasn't happening before. So
It's
it's a
true.
new way of using things that we already have. It's cost effective. It's a category that's acceptable now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having a conversation about that trend yesterday, and I was thinking about our friends over at Eileen Fisher and what they were doing with the collection that was taking the articles of clothing and being able to put it at a price point, where two sweaters and a skirt are now a tunic, or and they would like let but they were able to design with such beauty, with really good high quality materials that could be reused, and then sell it at the same price point or comparable, or but this was not looked at as like cheaply discounted, secondhand scraps. This was potentially a future model. And so piloting that out, now what you're saying makes me think that the community at large is ready to receive and accept that as an not only acceptable but maybe desirable way to look at fashion moving forward.
Mhm.
Is that true?
Yeah, 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 for
Yeah.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think even with one of the people that I work with is the Real Real, and they've really shown how you can actually resell something that you have, and you can actually get money for it, and you can buy something that you wanted that's not available anymore and pay less for it and be just as
Hmm.
happy. And so I think
Absolutely.
the Real Real has been very forward thinking in that way of shopping and changed our habits. And I think that will also change the way companies handle their merchandise too. I think the whole resale, repurpose part of fashion's really going to increase in ways we really can't imagine just yet.
Yeah, I'm wearing one of the Renewal Workshops refurbished Patagonia jackets underneath here, and it's like my favorite article of clothing because it represents my values too, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, it was at a great price point, but not super cheap,
yeah,
but they've actually rebuilt it, with the new zippers, and so, and I
yeah,
and I love that. And they're plugging into not only outdoor apparel, but I'm sure probably partnering with people like Real Real and thinking about a larger systems change approach. And I know they've expanded in Europe. And I think this is like the kind of thing that is going to take off, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, I think once we get, there's just so much unknown about this pandemic. I think it was a year ago and we had no idea. And
Hmm.
and we kept thinking it was going to be better in the summer, and then it was going to be better in September, and then it's going to be better in the fourth quarter for the holidays. So
Hmm.
it's been really hard to plan. But maybe
Yeah.
that's maybe it's going to cause us to really make really substantial changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're an optimist in terms of sustainability in the fashion industry, that you believe that it is not greenwashing, that it has moved into a level of operationalizing and looking at the financial benefits, and the design community is moving forward. Is that accurate to say you're optimistic?
I am. I mean, we knew this was coming 5 years ago. I mean, we were always saying that you better get dialed in on your responsibility, because that's going to be something in the future that is people are going to really look at. And it's easier to do it now as you're just beginning than to do it later and have to reinvent the wheel. We saw it coming. We just
Hmm.
didn't have, we didn't have a crystal ball, but we felt like all the indicators were leading that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
here. And it's not a
So,
conversation, which
yeah,
wasn't, we would have lost that conversation during the pandemic, and the conversation has not been lost.
correct. Yeah, we're finding at the Apparel Impact Institute that our brand partners and retailer partners are doubling down. Like, we've actually seen an increase in engagement and not the decrease that we were thinking. If you'd asked me 9 months ago, I was like, yeah, well, this is going to really slow down our work. It's the
Yeah.
opposite. It's the opposite. So, speaking of, so we've been talking about some of these innovations that we know about and that have been in development. Is there anything that is exciting you as Julie, who discovers things, artists, creatives, trends? Is there anything that you can say? Because you're probably under NDA with all kinds of amazing things, but is there something that's really exciting you that's coming up?
I yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are coming up. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm really excited about our new administration. I mean,
Mm,
honestly, our new administration, and just the fact that, Biden is putting climate control at the top of his agenda. I mean, that's incredible. And that we'll really be able to, because of the strength of the House and Senate, we'll really be able to get policy in
mhm.
and and vote on really critical subjects. And I think that's going to make a big difference. It's going to get so many people involved. We're all watching politics. I mean, we've been taught that we have to watch politics now. There's no one apathetic about it in this country. And
Yeah.
so, we're looking for change. And it's serious change, because our lives have been affected because of this pandemic, and the economic
Hmm.
are going to be effective. So I'm super hopeful about that, even though it's going to be a really hard time. I think we're learning that we just have to have more of a purposefulness. We have to have
Hmm.
responsibility and care for each other, which also includes the planet. It's just critical. And especially in our country, which has been sort of not, it's been removed from a lot of things. We've felt it this last year through so much
Hmm.
turmoil and fires in California and temperatures. And it's just right in front of us. Everybody's feeling it.
I think you bring up a really good point, because in the United States, we sit in sort of our privilege bubble. Regardless of who you are, you get to sort of sit separate from the rest of the world. And most of the issues of social and labor are offshored somewhere else. We don't know about them. We don't see them. These are not necessarily in front of us in our communities. Same with the way climate was and the pandemic. We could snicker at the people in Japan or China that wore masks on the subway and go, oh, look, they're all wearing their masks because their air quality is so bad, or they're worried about germs. Now we're all there, right? And so the forest fires in California, well, across the whole country, the fires across the whole country, the pandemic, and the risks that are associated, our social justice issues, around human lives. It's all here now, and we're not exempt, right? And I think to me, it feels like that is going to help us all return to, this is not a partisan issue, or this is not a them over there issue. This is all of us, right?
Yeah, no, it's been radical change in the last couple of years, and it's good. We're just
Yeah.
going to used to. We're going to have to let it settle in, and just so many things are going to change. I like change. If you don't like change, it's going to be a very difficult time.
Same, same here. Yeah, same here. I think it's a benefit when you're sort of and thinking of leaning into progress, right? So fashion industry is has a role in all this part that we just talked about, whether it's through publications like Vogue or whether it's through social influencers and social media platforms like TikTok, or like there is a role to use fashion as it's an art form like music and theater and film. It has a message, right? How do you see the sort of newfound responsibility of the industry to be a megaphone towards social and environmental issues?
Well, I mean, clothing is the is wordless communication.
Mhm.
So I mean, that's the way we communicate with each other, whether we are paying attention to it or not. That is a form of communication. So I think that that is in itself, you are the labels that you wear. So I
Mhm.
think that that becomes, I think that's going to, I mean, that's just the crux of the fashion business.
Mhm.
So, I think that because the fashion business has such a big impact on the planet, that I think if you're a big brand, you have to also be a part of that conversation. And it's also, we're living in the age of transparency. And so you have to be very careful about what you say, because you'll get called out if you're
Mhm.
not saying the right thing. But what's different is before you didn't have to say anything. Now you kind of, if you're not saying anything, you're going to get called out anyways. So it's just
Right.
like, clean up your act now. And it's
Mhm.
okay, okay that you haven't been doing things maybe in the best way possible.
Mhm.
And you have to take a little bit less of a profit to get to where you need. I mean, that's just that's just it. That's inevitable.
Yeah, I agree. So you talked about leadership coming out of the new administration, and really not as a partisan issue, but as a, like, really pulling together some of these core human issues around human safety and health and environment and how this is now back on the table. Are there leaders in the fashion industry that you're seeing emerge that are inspiring you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's there's a whole group of young people that we were talking about earlier that are using dead stock and upcycling and regenerating and all of that. And then there's people that have really, I think, always the same. Stella McCartney has always done, it's been such the leader of, 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 of being, thinking about your supply chain and materials and your impact. And, you have new people that are like Gabrielle Hurst, who was just named creative director of Chloe. I mean, that's really impactful.
Hmm.
um, she's going, she's driven in terms of that. And you have, I think that, I think, I think with the big, the big brands and the big stores, they're having to think about this too,
Hmm.
because they're not able to support. We can no longer support large inventories and markdowns and all that. It's just not. It's just not. It's not responsible any longer. So,
Yeah.
I think I, I I I honestly think the celebrities of our times are these women that have really fought for what's right and justice. Jill Biden, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, Stacey Abrams. They're just real fighters, and they sacrificed a lot. And those are the people that we're all looking up to and
Hmm.
following leads. So I think fashion, I don't really feel like fashion leads so much. I think it just reflects the times.
I love that. I love that. You just, as you listed that wonderful, wonderful collective, and I'm going to throw you in that list too, as I make this statement. In 2009, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said at the Vancouver Peace Summit, the world will be saved by the Western woman. And I was so deeply moved by that at the time that I really wanted to explore. I think you and I probably talked about this before, but I wanted to explore what that meant. And it wasn't for me only women, but I really thought about the feminine and the qualities and characteristics that women can bring to the table in leadership, around systems thinking, collaborative thinking, solutions-based, driven, as opposed to net zero sum, my gain, your loss. It's more of a, all gain scenario. And where did those qualities show up in me as a male gender, and where do they show up in other men? And I think there's been this real shift in embracing the feminine, and what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said 12 years ago, coming up on, is pretty powerful. And I think you just sort of articulated that. Do you agree with that statement? And it isn't just the Western woman, but I mean, do you agree that there is something we're seeing? I saw it in the inauguration day. I was like, wow, the table is big, and it's not tokenism. It's actually like everybody here's here for a reason.
I think it's a general inclusivity. Honestly, I think and that includes even non-gendered people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a general, we've gone from a Me Too arena to a size inclusivity to diversity to, so it's just part of it. There's an upheaval, and there's not anything that's been diminished needs to rise. And I think we're in that time, and everyone has a voice. So it's just, I really feel like we're in this era of inclusion, and I know there's so much work that needs to be done, and nothing's perfect, but nothing has felt this way ever. And so, you can truly take a stand and not be diminished for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a huge thing in fashion and in business. Everyone's always afraid to take a stand because they're afraid that they're going to offend somebody. That still holds true, but we're chipping away at it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what you said earlier too is actually your silence on an issue is complacency, and we're reading it in a different way. And that's, we were saying this about sustainability a number of years ago, which is, don't be afraid. Like, it's okay if you're only doing one or two things, but you're still burning coal in the mills. It's okay. Just be honest and start to shine the light on the things you are, because everybody's afraid to tell a story, because then the whole story. And I think what we're now saying is, no, you better be telling a story. Like, what you need to show up. Where do you stand? What are you doing about it? Right. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So mentorship, I think, is another interesting topic as well too. Is there any one, whether it's personal relationship or a book or a podcast, where are you getting your inspiration these days?
Well, I'm right in the middle of A Promised Land by Obama. And honestly, that's been such an education for me, because it kind of shows you how things work. And I think it's really important to know how things work, because how can you change them if you don't know how they work? So I'm really inspired by that. And I think trying to actually take more time, and not be 100% busy like, a type A New Yorker. Because I think now's the time to reflect and move forward. And like every great thinker, every, person that we admire from the past takes that contemplative time. And I think that that's actually really, really important. So I'm inspired by trying to be more quiet if I can. It's the hardest thing in life. But yeah, I just want to fill myself with documentaries and real stories, and to see the struggles, and to see how people actually handled them, because all of those are lessons and examples that we can apply to whatever situation.
Absolutely.
we're learning a lot. But yeah, I mean, I'm inspired by listening to podcasts like this. I mean, it's all food for thought. It's great. It's
I love
actually,
it too. Yeah, I love it too. It sounds, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the level of willingness to take in this information as bravery and curiosity. And I think that you're calling out those two qualities of like where you're sort of employing bravery and curiosity in the topics of the world today.
yeah, I think so. But I mean, it's very scary. It's very, I mean, there's so much fear right now.
Mm,
Just have to try to really, we're afraid, but let's transcend it. Let's try,
I
you
love
know.
it. I love
Yeah.
it. What's your call? Do you have a call to action for any listeners?
I think a call, I should have thought about this before, but I always go to the word now, purposefulness. And I feel like you always need to come back and ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? And is my choice, where is the purposefulness in this? And how does it affect people and planet? I just think that that's a good benchmark for everything. And
Yeah.
it kind of it helps with decision making, and it's the one thing that we can do. We can make
Mhm.
better choices, and that in itself is, if everyone really took a moment to think about that and actually acted on it, we'd be in a much better place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it actually gives back to you. It's like it just gives back. So I think to always just think, what is the purposefulness of this? And I mean, I'm in an industry, fashion, that is just, it's the quintessential consumption business. I
Hmm.
mean, you got to buy more to make more. And,
Hmm.
so how can we take that and make it more purposeful?
Yeah.
So, that's a question that can easily be answered. So, um, that's a question that we just need to be asking ourselves. And I think more people are asking that.
Hmm.
So if
I
we
agree.
just get caught in the negative thinking that tends to happen in so many things, there's nothing to come from that.
Yeah.
It doesn't help you move forward.
Yeah, I love it. I think we're all on our own journey to find our individual purpose and to lean into that. I think those of us who find that bravery and curiosity to say, what is the purpose, and then how do I bring this back to the systems that I'm in, like, which is what you're saying, which is asking the question of why this collection, why this time of the year, why this production, why these sales goals, like really to kind of look at the greater value, wealth generation and economic development in parts of the world where we're employing people. Yeah, absolutely. But there's got to be more than just those components. And it sounds like that those are the questions you're calling people to ask.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Julie, I could spend 2 hours for sure, and definitely a retreat weekend somewhere with you, just having these conversations on the trail, or and I hope we have that in our near future when we
We
can
will.
reconnect in person.
That happen for sure.
I love it. Well, lots of love to you. Thank you for this time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Congratulations on all you're doing, really. Thank
Thank
you for being
you.
purposeful in your work.
Thank you, Julie. That means a lot. Lots of love.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.